Hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region, and welcome to this Free State Colorado interview. Today, I'm joined by Cory Hughes, former police officer and deputy sheriff. He's a full time historian, author, and podcast host. His work can be found at coryhughes.org. Well, Cory, I hope you are well, and thank you for joining me today.
Yes, I'm well, and I appreciate you having me here. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, located just northwest of Fort Collins, Mishawaka Amphitheater is a beautiful riverfront venue for music in the Rocky Mountains. However, it seems they adhere to the anti cash agenda by proudly announcing on their website that they are cashless and that they do not accept cash. Cory, why is this a problem?
Well, there's a number of different ways to look at it, and before I get into that, let me tell you a little bit how I came about this discovery of Mishawaka not taking cash. I went out camping for a weekend, and then on the way back, Mishawaka was right there, and the Mishawaka restaurant I hear was a phenomenal restaurant, and it's got an amazing view on the river. And so we all stopped. A whole group of us stopped there to eat one day. And sure enough, we were notified once we sat down that they would not be taking cash. Now, I'm going to have to be honest with you. I am, like most people, I'm lazy. And when it comes to cash, I know I should use it a lot more than I do. And I do often use credit cards, debit cards, because they're convenient and we all live in the modern world. But I didn't really realize how adamant I was about the need for an option of using cash until this incident, because I found myself very angry on the spot because we are seeing this current wave of anti-American sentiment around the world and even here at home to a degree. And we're seeing businesses do things that I just see as blatantly anti-American. And to not take our currency, I think, is the most un-American thing that you can do as a business owner. It basically says that I don't have any appreciation for this land that allowed me to set up a business here, right? And so that was my initial reaction to it. And now the issue with cash is there's definitely a privacy issue there. But to me, cash represents real money. At one time, it represented real money. Now we all have problems with cash, and that's why things like Bitcoin have, come into existence in the first place, right? And so we can have a whole other conversation on why Bitcoin would be better than cash, but that's not the conversation here. This is not an economic conversation. This is more of a patriotic conversation, right? The idea of taking away people's ability to transact in a fungible manner, I believe, is paramount to our empire, really, our American empire. And so for a business to not only not take cash, but to willingly attempt to usurp the rules, that I found to be overly offensive. When I got home, I pretty much started researching the legalities of not taking cash. And I found that most places in this country, that's legal. It's legal for businesses to say, I don't want to take your cash, which to me is crazy. I think there should be a federal law passed mandating everybody take cash. Now, in Colorado and some of the other states where there are laws that say you have to take cash, and we do have one, it was written in 2021, and it was passed in 2022. And it's the Retailers Must Accept Cash Act. And there's no reasoning written into the bill, but there are exceptions and there's stipulations and all this stuff. And there are some reasonable exemptions to this rule, primarily being financial institutions that don't deal with cash, or that places that are automated that don't have a person on hand to take cash. There are certain exceptions which I can understand, just the model of the business and how it works would not be privy to taking cash. However, what they're doing at Mishawaka is they're outright violating the law by attempting to usurp the actual statute. So a business can be exempt from taking cash if they take prepaid cards that have certain stipulations to what kind of prepaid cards. Now, when you look up the legal definitions of prepaid card versus a gift card, they're two different things. And from what I've come to understand, prepaid cards are mostly things like prepaid Visa cards, debit cards, and they're mostly associated with financial institutions. And that was what the authors of the bill had in mind. And the authors of the bill were Senator Robert Rodriguez and Representative Alex Valdez, who wrote this bill and saw that it was passed in 22. And so What they are trying to do here at Mishawaka is they're attempting to use gift cards as a substitute for prepaid cards. And this is not, you can't do this, okay? That's not what the law was intended for. Um, and I think it's grossly dishonest. They know what they're doing. They know that they're not doing it the right way. And yet, the part of the problem is when you research this and you research Governor Polis's perspective on the law, he did write a brief concern about this law, saying that it was vague in its enforcement, right? Like he was confused by the gift card versus prepaid card and the stipulations and how he thought that it could be misinterpreted. And this is what we're getting. We're getting people exploiting this vague language. And so, yeah, I think as a business owner, especially here in Colorado, Colorado is one of the few states where people are like, they love living here. They're proud of Colorado. You see Colorado logos on everything. I've been all over this country. You don't see that in like Wisconsin, right? You don't see that in Connecticut, right? You don't get that in most of the country. And so for them to kind of, be a part of this Colorado culture here, and then to just take this stance and these actions on our currency, I think it's really sad. It's really sad. And unfortunately, it's not just limited to Mishawaka. So I have recently found that here in Fort Collins, this is all in Larimer County. I don't know what's going on down in Denver area, if any of this is affecting down there. But my roommates, believe it or not, they just went out and happened to go to a place called the Pickle Barrel, and they got denied because they wanted no cash. And so I'm like, this is crazy. I'm like, I have to figure this. This is spreading like a disease. I need to figure out what's going on here. Well, I look into the Pickle Barrel, and guess who the Pickle Barrel is owned by? It's owned by a conglomeration that consists of the owners of Mishawaka as well. In particular, the owner of Mishawaka, his name is Dan Mladnik, Mladenik, and he is part of the conglomerate that owns the Pickle Barrel also. So we have basically in Larimer County here, we have one business owner who is making this a hill to die on. And I just find it to be very anti-Colorado culture and extremely anti-American.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think, cash is such a fundamental part of just living in a free society. The ability to have untraceable currency that you can give out to whoever you want. There's no record of it, that privacy aspect you briefly mentioned. But just the freedom that it
Right.
entails, that you got the cash, you can go anywhere. And I really am sad for like the restaurant workers there. I mean, anybody who's worked in a restaurant before, especially maybe years past, maybe not as much now because everybody is using credit cards, but cash tips are where it's at. You don't have to,
Mm-hmm.
most people don't report their cash tips to the IRS for taxable income. God bless them. I hope they don't do that, but unfortunately, I'm sure some of them do. But just the idea that you're getting tipped cash money that, you're not having to worry about the fees to go into the restaurant that the restaurant has to pay and maybe take a portion of that out. I've seen some restaurants that do that. They kind of take some fees out of those credit card tips, which is really unfortunate. And then two, getting that money and how they divide it up and this and that. You give somebody $5-10 who helped you out, who gave great service. I mean, it's more than a tip because they're more likely not paying taxes on it. They have the money right there. They could go out and spend it at night. So I really feel bad for those workers at these
Mm-hmm.
places that just don't have that ability.
Yeah, so the owner and CEO, he actually responded to my first email and said that he was very sorry that I was offended by their decision and tried to give me a whole list of reasons why they're doing this. And the only reason I kind of was sympathetic slightly was that Mishawaka is in the middle of nowhere, really. It's 30-40 minutes from any banking establishment. So you have a security issue. You do. I'm not going to deny that. There's a security issue there. But it doesn't change the fact that ultimately they're doing this out of convenience and not for security reasons. And so that becomes obvious when you look at the other businesses that they own that are starting to implement this. They also own 2 bowling alleys here in Fort Collins, Chippers Lanes. And Chippers Lanes does concerts like all the time, and they do free Grateful Dead cover bands once a month. I mean, they have amazing stuff there. And I had never seen anything in regards to cash at those establishments, but I had never attempted to use cash at those establishments, so I don't know if that's the case or not. But I feel that this is not just a problem that will start and stay with Mishawaka. I think that this will set a precedent. And so what I've done thus far is I've filed reports with the Colorado Attorney General. I attempted to contact the Larimer County Sheriff, and the sheriff actually called me back, or a deputy called me back and looked into it and said, hey, I completely understand what you're getting at here, but this is administrative and it's kind of above our pay grade, so you have to go right to the Attorney General. So that's what I did. And I got with the Attorney General. I filled out their complaint form online. I spoke to them on the phone twice about this. And they seemed very interested. Yes, this is absolutely something we're interested in. And they basically told me they were going to be opening a case. Also, I filed another report once I found out about the pickle barrel. And so that almost immediately I got a response from them. I'm assuming it's going to be wrapped up into the original case as well. But I know that the wheels of justice turn slowly. And when you go to Mishawaka's website, this is the thing. In the email I received from Dan, the CEO, he basically said, we're abiding by the law and you can use cash to buy a gift card. And I responded back to him, well, thank you for admitting that you're trying to usurp the law using gift cards and not prepaid cards. And I gave him the legal definitions of prepaid cards. Because like I said, prepaid cards are specifically used and they're a tool of financial institutions. And that was the intent of the law. If the intent was to allow any business that offered gift cards to stop taking cash, every business in Colorado could do it because every business offers a gift card. Right. So the main difference between a gift card and a prepaid card is a prepaid card has multiple functionality to it, not just limited to a single store, and it can also be reloaded and used more than once, right? Gift cards are basically, you have a balance on there, you can use that balance, and then the card is disposed of. That's not how prepaid cards work. There's a distinct legal difference between the two. And like I said earlier, Mishawaka is just attempting to use linguistics to get around the law, which hopefully the Attorney General will see through what they're doing. And the only issue that could be here is that thanks to the governor, who basically muddied the water on this and outright publicly said that the statute is vague, he kind of gave Mishawaka at least an argument to be made in a court of law, which this should end up at, right? So
Wow, yeah, interesting. I think it's definitely anti-Colorado and anti-American to not take cash overall. It's interesting that Colorado has this protection for the people in Colorado to be able to use cash, and interesting that it was so recent as well. That's kind
right.
of surprising to
And it
me.
was
And
introduced by Democrats, which I found to be awfully strange. I figured that would have come from the Republicans, you know?
right, right.
So
Yes, and great. No, it's great news. I think that's a good protection for Colorado consumers, just Colorado people in general, to say you got to take cash because it's part of our common culture and our common kind of system of
yeah, and
governance in a
it's
way.
part of our American heritage, you know?
Definitely. Definitely. So it's interesting too that the Attorney General responded. I know the wheels of justice turn slowly, like you said, but I think the wheels of public opinion hopefully can
Mhm.
turn a little bit faster, and that people can get this information out there. Kind of, maybe either put some pressure on some businesses, and maybe there should be a list online, or at least some sort of public pressure campaign on
Right.
businesses and companies, business owners who are kind of pushing this anti-cash agenda. Because that's really what it's going to take, right? These businesses rely on the consumers to spend money with them. And if people are either resistant or reluctant or complaining about this the lack of ability to take cash, I think that can have almost a bigger impact than the Attorney General as well.
Right. And so I think the biggest problem is where this is heading, right? So it might not seem like a massive problem today. It might not seem, most people use their debit cards every day anyway. So for most people, this might not even be like a thing. They might even not realize there's a problem here. But ultimately, if you follow the removal of cash from our society, which seems to be a trend that people want to follow, that will ultimately lead us down a path of the central bank digital currencies, the CBDCs. And I don't go off on too paranoid a tip with the CBDCs that some people do. Some people will say that Bitcoin is like the gateway to CBDCs, which I think is completely false. But ultimately, the government does not like cash, and the government in its current form does not like cash because it's not traceable. They can't tax you. They can't see where you're actually spending your money, and they want to be able to control your money, right? And so ultimately, the goal of the central bank digital currencies is to control your spending habits and to not allow people to spend money in places that the government doesn't want, which really seems to apply to a lot of people, maybe in the content creation world, who are getting debanked and deplatformed, and they don't want people to be able to send them money at all, right? Ultimately, what I think these central bank digital currencies are about are excluding people from our society. That's really what it's about. And cash is all inclusive. Cash doesn't care where you got it. Cash doesn't care where it's going. Cash is it's fungible, it's neutral, and it can be passed around by anybody. You don't have to have an ID. I mean, it is it's the next best thing to having an actual, piece of gold or something worth actual tangible value in your pocket. I mean, honestly, for all the Bitcoiners out there like me, we understand all the problems with cash. And like I said, the problems with cash are a whole different conversation. The problems with cash don't attack our sovereignty. You know what I mean? And so that's the problem here, that when you get rid of cash, you attack American sovereignty. And so that was my ultimate problem with this. And I'd hate to see us in a world where we're forced to use methods of transacting that we don't want to, you know?
Oh, definitely. That's a frightening vision for sure. Just this year, too, there was a bill passed, Governor Polis signed to create a special merchant code for credit card purchases at gun stores. So people who can go buy guns and ammo or accessories for their firearm. Now there's going to be a special merchant code here coming up soon in Colorado for any of these Colorado small businesses. So, you combine that with somebody who's, saying, hey, you can't pay cash, trying to force people into using credit cards or some sort of other type of system like that. And then there's special codes that track those purchases. You can kind of see the bigger picture here of how
Yeah.
this whole type of control system could be put into place. Really, I mean, that's frightening.
Absolutely. And most people don't really understand the large scale implications of what this stuff is. And not to be an alarmist or jump to the furthest reaching conclusion, but all of these little things are not only social engineering, but this is the epitome of cultural Marxism being forced upon us at a very subtle level, right? It's the boiling frog thing, right? Before you know it, we're a communist country and you don't even know how we got here. It's by things like this. It's by getting rid of cash. It's by limiting credit card exposure to gun purchases for whatever reason, right? Which, I mean, obviously, Second Amendment is crucial to, every other amendment, right? You need the guns to protect everything else. And so, ultimately, I mean, I hate to just sum it up in such a overly simplified view, but I kind of see that there's really politically speaking, there really are only two worldviews. You have this globalism view, which is communism and all the things in social Marxism, and then you have the nationalist view. And I'm having a hard time finding anything in the middle that has any kind of actual functionality. And so that's what this really is. I see a very small percentage of people who are actually anti-American, anti-free markets, and they are trying to implement their will to get rid of guns, to get rid of cash, to do all these things, right? And so being here, that we're Americans and this is America, the idea that they could even do this at all is just shocking to me. If people really understood history and really understood how far we have fallen from a liberty perspective as a nation in the last 200 years, hell, just in the last 60 years, I would say, well, for me, my whole life revolves around the Kennedy assassination. So I see the Kennedy assassination as the biggest turning point in the last 100 years plus. And so, but yes, America is most certainly under attack from within. We're destroying ourselves from within. And really, what it comes down to is that we have a society that fosters difference of opinion and fosters, a place where you can form numerous ideologies about the country and basically worldviews in general. And I think that's a major problem. Not to be anti-democratic or anything, but really culture and the people should all be kind of one in an ideology perspective. They really should have a certain core group of principles that they all agree to and that everyone's willing to fight and defend. But no, that's not how it is. That's not how it's been for a very long time. Once upon a time, I think we had that in America. We had a strong American culture with American values, but that has been shattered. And I think it's been shattered intentionally by external forces. And that's the road we're on. And that's the road that I see all of these the CBDCs and the anti-gun stuff, and really these are all communist principles that I'm seeing interjected into our society. So um,
Yeah, definitely appreciate you tying into that bigger picture there because for sure, there's this big agenda to kind of destroy this idea of America or at least subvert
mhm,
it or shift it in a way, especially you can talk about public schools and the media and everything that's been going on there for a long time now. There's Terence McKenna called it the balkanization of
right,
epistemology, where people's
right.
worldviews are becoming so separate and so fragmented from each other that there's not this cohesive kind of idea of Americanism or this American pride that people have.
Mhm.
It's waning a little bit. I was very fortunate up here in Greeley. We had a great Fourth of July parade for the Independence Day, and it was great to see the community show up and so many people from all different walks of life, clearly, but all kind of celebrating Americanism in a way and celebrating the community. So more of that, is I think is one of the solutions there, and of course using cash is a part of that. That's part of our community. It's this common culture that everybody can get behind. No matter what the difference you have, cash is the common denominator, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it sure is. And it's really unfortunate. I remember one of my very early memories. My father took me to the like centennial or of the Statue of Liberty in New York when I was like 6 years old or something like that, and that stuck with me my whole life. Seeing just a sea of people all together over this American icon, right, and celebrating it. I mean, you have to acknowledge there's a tad bit of propaganda in that, but you need propaganda to a certain degree to kind of get across ideas very, in a very sharp way. And so not all propaganda is bad. Not all propaganda is evil, right? Some propaganda is good for promoting a common sentiment or a common feeling. Um, but that event always stuck with me and I'll never forget it. And it was such a feeling of being united with everybody around you, right? And so, and it doesn't even matter. This is America. It doesn't even matter about race or what culture you came from before or any differences we might have, is that we should all be able to unite around this American culture. Not that I approve of anything that the government has done for the last 100 years. Period. I separate the principles of America and the concept and the people from the government, of course. We all have to. But yes, I would love to see everybody in America come together, shed their really superfluous, nonsensical ideologies that we see artificially injected into society, and really come to understand that it was those original American principles that even set the stage to allow people to even have different perspectives in the first place. You know what I mean? So it was this core set of principles that even allows you to go out. People go out and protest. That's because of the system that we had in place, not something new, not some communist system, right? So people always forget that the reason that they even have the ability to have different beliefs in the first place is because we had a culture that encouraged that, right? So yeah, it's offensive seeing what they're doing with the money, and I just couldn't let it go. And honestly, I didn't really feel like, I don't consider myself really an activist or anything like even remotely close to that. But this one issue was so close to home, I didn't feel like I had a choice because I didn't see anybody else stepping up to do anything about it either. So that's kind of what propelled me to action with this Mishawaka situation.
Well, I definitely appreciate it because, there's no shortage of problems in our society. And you talk to anybody, they'll tell you all the problems that are going on, but it takes something to stand up and make a stand and do something about it, use your voice and push back on this system because you know where it's taken us, you know where it's going, and stand up for our American values. So I really applaud you for doing that. I really appreciate this conversation. I think it was a lot of fun, a lot of interesting information, and let's hopefully this is a little bit of alarm bell for some people out there to really pay attention to this anti-cash agenda. When you're out shopping, people, you go to any restaurant, bar, wherever it is, try and pay cash. Try and pay cash if you can, especially if you're tipping somebody. If you're tipping somebody in the staff, cash is a lot better. They're not going to get taxed on it. They're for the most part, they're going to be able to spend it right away. You're truly rewarding that person who deserves it. So cash, and if yeah, and people, if you see anything out there where they're not wanting to take cash or they're pushing this type of agenda, make your voice heard, speak out. And I'll include the link at freestatecolorado.com where this interview will be for the Attorney General's website there for anybody who wants to make a report as well. But I really appreciate your time today, Cory. Really appreciate anything else you want to leave us with?
No, other than saying, if they only get me complaining and I'm the only one complaining about this, it doesn't really show that there's much of an outcry, right? And so I would just suggest that everybody maybe not send a report, but send an email to the Attorney General's office and just let them know that you're concerned about this and that you're seeing it spread, and something has to be done about it. So that would be my only suggestion, is that other people get involved and contact the AG's office.
Awesome.
Or
Awesome.
even
Well, thank
Mishawaka directly and let them know directly. Because if an outcry from the people comes, I can tell you with certainty, because I know somebody who actually works at Mishawaka, they are all miserable there that they have this policy. They all the employees hate it, and they don't think there's anything that they can do about it. They don't feel that they have a voice. So,
Awesome. Yeah, great advice. Definitely people speak out, stand up, use what you can to get information out there and show some support for our cash-based economy if you can. Awesome. Thank you, Cory. Take care.
hey, thank you. Bye bye.